Okay, welcome back to the Daily Vent. So, where is the line? That's the note. Where is the line? I might do a couple notes in this episode. I probably will. I gotta speed up the pace because I want to get past all my notes and get on current events and stuff like that, because stuff keeps happening. It's I'd like to talk about that. It's relevant. And to be honest, sometimes it's about that would get views if I talked about that, whatever. But it's what are we all about? Anyway, where is the line? You could expand this many different ways. So essentially, where is the line can vary based on what the topic at hand is, right? So where is the line when it comes to the value of human life, right? So on the abortion topic, which, people make that really taboo and political, but at the end of the day, should it be? Where is the line when it comes to the life of the unborn, a baby, etc., etc.? Because the old saying, if you give them an inch, they take the mile. They'll take a mile. As soon as you get into this whole clump of cells argument, whatever, it's now we're talking about, how early along the line is it okay to end the process that culminates in a human life? Because that's really what it is, right? Because it's at the moment of conception, if that process has been started. Let's do a quick Google search here, right? So, what is the chance of a pregnancy conception being brought to term? So I'm just putting brackets, birth. Because what I'm basically trying to ask is, what are the chances that if you are pregnant, you will give birth? Based on the provided search results, here's a summary of the information. According to the article, survival probability of human conceptions from fertilization to term, basically, PubMed, about 73% of natural single conceptions have no real chance of surviving 6 weeks of gestation. So wait, what does that even mean? About 73% of natural single conceptions have no real chance of surviving 6 weeks of gestation. Of the remainder, about 90% will survive to term. So this feels too wordy, and I don't know enough about the terminology, because I don't think what it's saying is 73% of natural single conceptions have no, because they use a double negative here, or don't they? Have no real chance of surviving. Can I get AI to explain this? I don't think it's a double negative, actually. Can you describe this? Explain. Okay, about 73% of natural pregnancies that start with a single embryo do not survive beyond 6 weeks of gestation. This means that a significant majority of early pregnancies end before reaching the 6-week mark. So, does that mean that, I'm trying to figure this out. So does that mean that 73% of the times you get pregnant, it doesn't pan out past 6 weeks? Because if that statistic is in any way true, then you see why people make that argument. Because if you terminate before 6 weeks, 73% don't even survive 6 weeks. Even then, even if I'm interpreting this correctly, there's still a more than a quarter chance that you're ending a baby's life that's going to be brought to full term. So the chance of a pregnancy conception being brought to term varies significantly based on numerous factors, including maternal age, health, prenatal care, and any underlying medical conditions. However, statistics indicate that approximately 89% of recognized pregnancies lead to a live birth, assuming there are no complications. So this is another thing where it's so you have this here. This is also a specific PubMed study, right? So then you also have to keep in mind, what does one study say one thing? Does one study say another? What is the actual truth? And then it even says of the remainder, about 90% will survive to term. So then is it of 27%, there's a 90% chance. But then it just, am I interpreting this correctly, or is that also just what they found in that one study? And then over here it says this. So then which AI do you trust? The article Pregnancy Conception Calculator mentions that conception usually occurs around 11 to 21 days after the first day of the last menstrual period. It also states that about around 50% of all fertilized eggs do not implant and leave the body the same way as unfertilized eggs do during menstruation. So it's kind of wordy. Days, 21 days after the first day of the last menstrual period. It also states that around 50% of all fertilized eggs do not implant. So is this basically saying that like you might have multiple fertilized eggs, but they don't all stay there and develop? Is that what it's saying? See, like, because what I'm basically trying to say is it's like if you are pregnant, what is the chance that you will give birth? You know, the article Fetal Development Week by Week Stages of Pregnancy defines full-term pregnancy as 39 weeks or more, and notes that infants born at 39 have better health outcomes. Considering these points, here's an estimate of the chance of a pregnancy conception being brought to term, birth. Assuming a natural conception, about 90% of fertilized eggs will survive to term, based on the PubMed article. So I guess it was saying like what percent of fertilized eggs survive. So that might be like what percent of fertilized eggs stay in the oven, so to speak. The oven being the uterus, I'd assume. So about 90% of fertilized eggs will survive to term. Okay. So if I'm understanding this correctly, because I'm not a physician, if you are pregnant, you got a baby in the oven that is developing, okay? 90% chance you will give birth to the baby. Okay? If I understand that correctly. However, about 50% of fertilized eggs do not implant and are lost during menstruation. Okay, but this is kind of like a side point here, because it's like, if in the natural process of things, fertilized eggs are lost during menstruation, that's not even to the abortion argument, because like this is happening naturally without a human involvement in obstructing the process, right? Because we're talking about like, I think the main thing is like interfering with natural processes and God's design for things, right? So it's like about 50% of fertilized eggs do not implant and are lost during menstruation. Like, because we're talking about like if you're manually terminating, right? Like this egg, like let's say like this egg's been fertilized and it's implanted, like it's going to happen. And then if it's implanted, it seems that 90% chance of success, right? So you are, if I understand this correctly, terminating a 90% success rate of baby, right? So there is a 90% chance that is going to be a living human being, or it's a living human being before it's born, but there's a 90% chance that human being is going to exit womb, stage right, and live outside the womb. You know, aside from any like birth complications, which I think nowadays with modern medicine is probably relatively low. It's just an assumption, but it's like 90% chance that baby's going to be born, right? So then you are interfering with a highly, highly likely chance of human being living life outside womb, right? However, about 50% of fertilized eggs do not implant and are lost during menstruation, according to the pregnancy conception calculator. Therefore, the effective chance of a conception being brought to term is approximately 45%, 90% survival rate times 50% implantation rate. See, this is maybe, I have not heard this argument before. I could see the pro-abortion side of things trying to use this as an excuse where it's like, well, only a certain amount are implanted, and so how much are you really interfering with the chances? Because it's like, if you talk about the whole like implantation rate, it's like but like if you're pregnant, you're pregnant. Like, I think the only way that you could no longer be pregnant naturally after being pregnant is if you have miscarriage. So maybe we'll go this way. I'll start this in a new window. Just because I find like this is like, it's like I feel like it's kind of like a lost rabbit trail argument. Because it's like 90% survival rate, right? So you are ending the process of which has a 95 or 90% survival rate, right? So what is the chance of a pregnancy ending in miscarriage? I think I spelled this wrong. According to the search results, the chance of a pregnancy ending in miscarriage varies depending on the state, or varies depending on the stage of pregnancy. Here are some key statistics. First trimester up to 13 weeks, the rate of miscarriage is higher, ranging from 10 to 25%. The study suggests that the overall probability of a pregnancy ending in miscarriage at 4 weeks is 25%. In the UK, I didn't know it was that high initially. And it's also important to probably take the overall average of miscarriages, but like, yeah, it's like worth noting, if that's the facts of the matter, that's the facts of the matter. That shouldn't change the fact that we shouldn't use that to justify killing it anyway. Like, this is the other thing where I find, like, even if you take this argument to a fuller extent, like the pro-choice or pro-abortion side of the argument would still, like, if let's say the percentage was like 50% miscarriage rate, does a 50% chance of the kid not living justify killing it when it would have a 50% chance of surviving? Like, it's still a bad argument. Like, it's just like it's just like, what are we doing here? You know? Okay, second trimester, the rate of miscarriage is lower, ranging from 2 to 4%. So then you have to ask, okay, how many? So there is a 90 or 75 to 90% chance, based on this, of the pregnancy going beyond the first trimester. And then once you're past the first trimester, you're kind of in the clear. Like, again, it's not guaranteed that you're in the clear, because stuff can still happen, even if it's like a 1% chance, like, it could still happen to you, obviously. But if we're just talking like just the statistical probabilities, right? The rate of miscarriage is lower, ranging from 2 to 4%. Second trimester, after 20 weeks, second half of pregnancy, the chance of experiencing a miscarriage is less than 0.5%. Pregnancy lost after 20 weeks is considered a stillbirth. Very sad stuff. So, fortunately, the statistics of that happening seem to be quite low, right? And so, and how many people, because the argument becomes worse the further down the road they try to draw out the abortion accommodations, right? Because if you're making an argument for second trimester abortions, now the miscarriage rate, because the only statistic that I think that they could try to use to justify it is if it is a large percentage of miscarriage rate. They might use that to justify as like, well, like, the baby could just die on its own anyway, so if we end the baby's life, what's the big deal, or whatever. Like, I still think that is a bad argument, but they might try to use that argument along with other arguments. So at second trimester, that statistical probability is quite low, like 2 to 4%. So if anybody's pushing for that, it's like you have a like 96 to 98% chance that that baby's going to survive, other than, you know, random out of the blue circumstances happening. But if we're just talking about like the chance of miscarriage is like being quite low, and then after 20 weeks, like, we're talking like very, 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 very high chance of success based on this part here, right? Like, maybe there's other information I'm missing or not covering, so fair enough. But like, regardless, it's like your odds are getting really good here of infant survival, right? So, because I think that that's one of the main things that sticks out to me as an argument against, like, other than just like the morals, the simple morals and binary moral factor here of like, let's not end the process of life here, right? But like, the main thing being is, it's like statistically speaking, there's a high likelihood that this like person is going to like live a life outside the womb, like, and you're just like ending that process. No, like, this argument is more directed at people that are like all for that. Like, they're all about, yeah, you know, everybody, it's fine, you know, to have that happen. Like, people that talk like that it's like, everything's all fine, shouldn't be shy about abortions or whatever. Like, people that think like that and still think like that after having had one and continue to think like that perpetually, this is more who that argument is directed at. Because, like, if there's ever somebody that's had an abortion done and they feel really bad about it, then, like, let's have, like, some compassion and sympathy, because if that person's repented of that, then, like, that's a completely different scenario, right? Because, like, the thought process and the mentality and the heart attitude is completely different. But if somebody's, like, had an abortion, they're like, yeah, it's fine, everybody should be fine with it, it's fine, it's not a big deal, it's just a clump of cells. Like, if that's still the attitude and there's no remorse after doing that process, that's a completely different thing. And that's, like, where the argument's directed at, is that mentality. Where if somebody has remorse, it's like, let's, like, have, like, compassion, right? Because for some people, maybe that is a thing where they were fed this narrative of just a clump of cells, no big deal, and then afterwards they're like, oh my gosh, I feel terrible, kind of thing. Like, that's like a different thing altogether, right? But that's usually not the narrative that is being put out, right? So all this to say, like, because we're getting back to the main point here, where it's like, where is the line, right? And, like, hopefully it's viewed as a good thing that I just do these internet searches on the fly and stuff like that, because at least, like, there's an opportunity. Like, I'm only reading through so much of it, right? Like, I could read through more of it, but it's like, just kind of want to move on. Like, I mean, I could read through more of it now if you want, but it's basically, like, hopefully it's just seen as me doing some level of due diligence here, right? So, like, overall, up to 25% of known pregnancies may end in miscarriage, according to the National Library of Medicine. So, up to 25% of known pregnancies. So I think that because this is incorporating all the stuff from each stage, is that how it is? So it says may end, right? Doesn't mean they will, but it may, right? Because it's like just statistical probabilities. I am kind of surprised that it is that high. Even then, 75% chance that it won't. 75% chance that you are ending the process that is going to end in a baby being born. That is the key factor in this, right? Recurrent miscarriages, likelihood of having recurrent miscarriages, at least 2 or 3, is low, occurring in about 1% of women. So that's also interesting. So because even if people use the excuse of, like, well, what about miscarriages? So if we kill it, is it a big deal? It's like, well, how many? Oh dear, lights on low battery now. Anyway, okay, so no more backlighting on this side. Anyway, so even if that is the case, and they make this argument, right, you could also say that, well, if you have had a miscarriage, and then you use that as a justification for, like, why would abortion be so bad if miscarriage is a possibility or whatever, then, like, a response could be like, well, the chance of that happening again is very low, right? So it shouldn't be. Like, I know I'm really hinging on this whole miscarriage argument. I just feel like this would be one of the arguments presented. So if we're going to take it to its fullest extent, this is probably along the lines of how the argument goes, where it's like, it's still not a good argument, saying, like, well, it could happen anyway, so therefore what's the big deal? It's like, yeah, but, like, there's still a high chance of success in pregnancy here. And the likelihood of having recurrent miscarriages, at least 2 or 3, is low, occurring in about 1% of women. So even if you have had a miscarriage, even if miscarriage is used as an excuse, the idea of it happening more than once is extremely low, so it shouldn't be used as, like, a reason for why it should be considered okay. And I don't even know if people are using this. Like, out of all the arguments given, I never really see miscarriage used as an argument to justify the abortion process. But usually you hear about, like, rape and incest and stuff, and it's like, I don't actually think that is a large amount of pregnancies. So that's, like, a whole different tangent. I could look that up too if you want, but I'm kind of getting really stuck on this topic here. I think that this is one, like, to get back to, like, where is the line? This is, like, one of the modern issues where you could argue there needs to be a pretty firm line, because it's like, if we are not willing to protect the life of the unborn, then what are we doing? What are we about? If we won't even do that, like, if we won't even treat that with a certain level of urgency, then what are we all about? Well, like, what are we really doing, right? So Risk factors, certain health conditions such as unmanaged diabetes, infections, or issues with the uterus or cervix can increase the chance of miscarriage. Additionally, a person's medical history can also impact the risk of miscarriage. So, like, again, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a physician, I'm not an expert. I'm just some dude on the internet, Googling and reading some stuff. No expert whatsoever. Just hopefully I get people to think about stuff. So, it's essential to note that miscarriage rates may be higher if considering miscarriages that happen shortly after implantation, which may not be recognized as a pregnancy. So yeah, it's also like, what are the ways that they collect the data to represent the argument, right? Because it kind of like comes back to that Mark Twain quote, which I will paraphrase, where he's like, there's lies, darn lies, and statistics. So it's kind of like you can almost get the info to say what you want to say. That's not necessarily what's happening here, but that is always something that could be a possibility. So it almost kind of comes down to, like, if you really take an argument to its fullest extent, it really just comes down to what are your morals on the issue to a certain degree, because you could always kind of get things to say what you want to say and this, that, and the other. But at the end of the day, if you have to answer to God for this, like, is this really the decision and stance that you want to take? That's kind of where it's at, you know, like, what do you really want to be the final decision on this matter, right? So, and I can get into, like, other stuff on this argument that might be used as, rebuttals or other reasons for why people might try to justify this, but I'm hinging far too much on this, or I'm getting stuck far too much on this topic, so I'm just going to move on. Or maybe I'm not getting too stuck on it. Maybe it is important to harp on it because it's kind of one of the more relevant issues of our time in the West. So where is the line? Like, in terms of, like, everybody's got to think about this, and this is the main thing, is that you need to figure this out, or you need to think, or you should anyway. You should figure this out, and you should think, because at some point it might be relevant, whether if it's based on how you vote or how you talk to people, how you operate in your life. Like, where is the line? Especially, like, when it comes to, like, what are they teaching to the children? Where's the line there? Like, what are we gonna just allow to be taught? And what are we gonna say? Hey, no, I'm not okay with you teaching my kids that stuff, whatever. Right? So, like, there should be a line, because if there is no line, then society probably gets very scary very quickly, right? So, I'll leave that there.